The winter of 1943 gripped Europe in its cold, merciless fist. From the snow-cloaked forests of the Ardennes to the ravaged cities of northern France, the land lay silent under ash-gray skies. War had stripped the color from the world. The rivers ran dark with oil and blood, and the airfields, once symbols of national pride, were little more than skeletons of hangars and half-buried machines. The Luftwaffe, once masters of the air, were now shadows of their former glory. Tired men, dwindling fuel, and fewer planes returning after every sortie. At the Amiens airstrip in occupied France, dawn came slowly, a dull orange glow pushing weakly through a sea of frost. Rows of Messerschmitt Bf-109s lined the field, their sleek bodies silver-gray, wings stiff with ice. The ground crews moved like ghosts in heavy coats, stamping their feet for warmth as they prepared the aircraft for another day of battle. The sound of engines sputtering to life cut through the stillness, a harsh metallic cry that echoed across the frozen ground. Lieutenant Franz Müller walked alone toward his plane. His boots crunched through the frost, leaving shallow impressions in the brittle earth. The bitter air clawed at his lungs. He carried his helmet under one arm, his flight log under the other, his movements steady but weary, those of a man long acquainted with death. He was 23, but the lines etched into his face told a different story. He had been flying since he was 18, drawn into a war that promised glory but delivered only ghosts. His Messerschmitt, Yellow 7, waited for him like a loyal hound, its nose painted with the fading emblem of his squadron, its sides streaked with soot from countless missions. The machine was beautiful in a cold, deadly way, sleek as a blade, crafted for killing. Yet to Franz, it was more than that. It was the only place that made sense anymore. On the ground, there were questions, doubts, politics. In the sky, there was only survival. "Fuel's low again, Herr Lieutenant," his mechanic, Dieter, called out, wiping grease from his hands. "Command says you're cleared for one sortie before we refuel. Make it count." Franz gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "When do I not?" He climbed the wing, his breath fogging against the glass canopy. Inside, the cockpit smelled of oil and cold metal. He ran his fingers over the instruments, altimeter, throttle, compass. Each one familiar, each one a lifeline. Outside, the sky was turning pale, streaks of gray pushing away the night. The cold bit through his gloves as he pulled them tight. The radio crackled to life. "Eagle Squadron, report. Allied bombers sighted northeast. Altitude 20,000 feet. Heading west toward the Channel. Orders are interception and elimination. Godspeed." The words were mechanical, hollow. Franz didn't reply. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Messerschmitt roared, shaking like a living thing eager to hunt. The propeller blurred into motion, slicing through the morning mist. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of ice and dirt, and as he gained speed, the world fell away beneath him. He climbed higher and higher, breaking through the fog into the endless gray-blue above. Here, above the clouds, the world was different, silent, eternal, cold. The war below felt distant, almost unreal. But soon, black dots appeared on the horizon. Bars. He counted 5, maybe 6, lumbering shapes dragging trails of smoke through the sky. B-17 flying fortresses, the Americans called them. Massive, defiant, and relentless. Each one carried bombs enough to erase a city block. He could see the glint of sunlight on their glass noses, the glimmer of machine guns mounted at every angle. They moved slowly, but they were fortresses indeed, flying death machines guarded by walls of lead. Franz's heart began its steady rhythm, the rhythm of a hunter. He adjusted his oxygen mask, flipped the safety on his cannons, and climbed into the sun, ready to dive. The old instincts returned like muscle memory. His world narrowed to the crosshairs in his scope and the hum of the engine beneath him. He picked his target, the straggler. At the rear of the formation, one bomber was struggling. Its left engine coughed black smoke, its formation slipping. The others pressed on, leaving it behind. It was wounded, vulnerable, easy prey. He lined up the shot. One burst from his 20mm cannons, and it would be over. But something about the way it moved stopped him. The plane didn't maneuver or fight back. It limped. It crawled through the sky like a dying animal. Its tail was shredded, riddled with bullet holes. Its rear guns hung silent. Franz hesitated. Through the glass of his canopy, he could almost see the men inside, tiny silhouettes moving frantically. He thought of what they must be feeling: fear, desperation, hope hanging by a thread. He had seen that same look in his own comrades' eyes when their planes went down in flames. He had heard their screams over the radio, and in that moment, something inside him cracked. He could end it now. One squeeze of the trigger, and it would all be over. He would earn another victory, another confirmation on his record. Command would praise him. His fellow pilots would raise their mugs in his name. But the thought made him sick. He remembered Hans, his younger brother, who had flown over Stalingrad and never returned. He remembered the letter from home, his mother's handwriting trembling with grief. "Promise me, Franz," she had written, "promise me that no matter what they make you do, you will not lose your soul." He hadn't understood then, but now, staring at the dying bomber, he did. He throttled back, moving closer instead of firing. The American plane was so badly damaged that he could see through its fuselage. Sheets of torn metal flapped in the wind. The tail gunner's position was empty, blackened with blood. A man sat slumped near the nose, motionless. The others were patching holes with scraps of cloth and faith. Franz flew parallel, just meters away. The bomber's pilots saw him now. The waist gunner swung his weapon toward him instinctively, but the man in the pilot's seat raised a hand, shouting something Franz couldn't hear. The gunner froze. No one fired. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other. Two enemies sharing the same patch of sky. Two men bound by fate. The American's face was pale, his helmet cracked. Franz could see the exhaustion etched into his eyes. The Messerschmitt's guns were silent. The bomber's guns were silent. The only sound was the groaning of engines and the eternal wind. Franz gestured with his hand, motioning toward the north, toward neutral Sweden. He tried to tell them to land, to surrender, to live. But the American shook his head and pointed west. Home, England. Franz's stomach twisted. That path meant death. The bomber could barely hold altitude, and once it crossed the coast, it would be within range of the German anti-aircraft guns. They would finish what he refused to start. He had a choice to make. He could turn back, return to base, pretend he never saw it. That was what any good soldier would do. Or he could follow his conscience into treason. Franz looked again at the men inside the bomber, their wounds, their courage. He made his choice. He banked slightly, bringing his Messerschmitt alongside the bomber's wing. The American pilots looked at him, confused. He dipped his nose once, signaling. Then he turned west, matching their speed. He wasn't going to kill them. He was going to protect them. And as the gray expanse of the channel came into view, Franz Müller, the German ace, the Luftwaffe's sharpest blade, became something else entirely. He became their guardian angel. The B-17 lumbered through the gray sky like a wounded beast, its engines coughing and sputtering, dragging the shattered remnants of its crew across the frozen expanse.
Inside, Lieutenant Charlie Brown gripped the yoke with knuckles white as frost. The cockpit smelled of smoke, oil, and blood, the thin oxygen supply doing little to ease the sting of cold and exhaustion.
His co-pilot, Lieutenant James "Jimmy" Harris, sat slumped beside him, head tilted awkwardly to one side, a deep gash streaked with dark blood across his temple. The rest of the crew fared worse.
The tail gunner's position was empty, a grim reminder of the indiscriminate hand of death. The radio operator's legs dangled uselessly over the torn edge of a hole in the fuselage. The bombardier clutched a shattered instrument panel, his face frozen in horror. Through the jagged holes, the sky twisted in smoky ribbons, black trails of flak rising like serpents against the clouds. Every second felt stretched, elastic with fear, every breath a negotiation with mortality.
Charlie's hands shook, but he gritted his teeth and focused on the horizon. Every control input required precision. The wings flexed under the stress of battle damage, metal groaning as if alive. The B-17's left engine was wounded, coughing thick smoke, oil spilling like tears down the fuselage. The aircraft's frame shuddered under every gust of wind. Every motion, every sound was a reminder of how fragile life could be, how fragile survival itself was. And then, as he adjusted his course toward England, a shadow appeared beside them. At first, Charlie thought it was another enemy fighter coming for the kill, but the German plane didn't dive, didn't fire. It kept pace, matching the bomber's slow, limping flight. The Messerschmitt glided alongside them, almost impossibly close. The pilot's face was visible through the frost-crusted canopy, a young man, calm, determined, his eyes heavy but lucid. Charlie's mouth went dry. The enemy wasn't attacking? He was escorting them? The waist gunner instinctively reached for his weapon, but Charlie's voice, raw and urgent, cut through the haze of fear. "Do not fire! Do not fire at him!" The man froze, hands trembling. Through the broken fuselage, the B-17 shuddered again as the left engine hiccuped violently. Charlie turned back toward the Messerschmitt, disbelief warring with relief. Every instinct told him to panic, to shoot, to defend. But here, suspended in the thin, frigid air of winter above France, instinct was overridden by something else, a recognition of humanity. The German pilot mirrored his motions almost subtly, adjusting his wing, moving to shield the bomber from anti-aircraft fire below. German flak batteries paused, confusion rippling through the ranks as they noticed one of their own protecting an enemy plane. Franz Mueller's calm presence acted as a shield in the sky, drawing attention away from the wounded bomber. Charlie peered through the jagged window. The damage was horrific. The tail swayed dangerously. The control cables snapped back and forth, frayed and raw. Gaping holes revealed glimpses of the sky beyond, the frozen world spinning in dangerous beauty. The crew was battered, faces streaked with blood, arms broken, hands gripping the remnants of control panels. A breathless silence hung between every man and the approaching death. The bomber struggled to maintain altitude. Every second in the air was a gamble, every gust a threat. Yet, beside them, the Messerschmitt glided with unwavering precision. Its engine's roar was steady, a reassurance against the chaos. Charlie had flown countless missions, fought against flak and fighters, but never had he seen such a display. An enemy fighting not against them, but seemingly for them. The hours stretched like eternity. Below, the French countryside moved in a muted haze, forests like dark pools, rivers frozen and glinting, towns reduced to rubble from bombing raids. Above, clouds twisted and writhed, gray and unyielding. Charlie's mind raced with disbelief. Could he trust this German pilot? Was this some trap? Was this a test of courage or sanity? But something in the calm, sorrowful eyes in the Messerschmitt told him the answer.
This was not a trap. It was mercy. He remembered the words his father had whispered when he was a boy. Sometimes courage is not in fighting, but in letting life live. And now, suspended between clouds and wind, he understood. The German pilot beside him was not a killer in this moment. He was a witness to life. Charlie tried to communicate, waving and gesturing through the broken fuselage, attempting to convey gratitude, confusion, and hope all at once. Franz responded in kind, tilting his wings gently, signaling understanding. No words passed, no radios crackled, only the language of shared humanity in the vast, frozen sky. Every time flak erupted below, Franz shifted, maneuvering with precision to shield the bomber. Shells screamed past, tearing at the air. The B-17 shuddered violently, metal screaming under the stress, but Franz kept his place, unwavering. Charlie marveled at the skill, the calm composure, the impossible choice of mercy amidst the carnage. Hours felt like minutes. Every second was etched with tension, every heartbeat a reminder of mortality. Charlie thought of his friends, some already buried, others still clinging to life, and knew that their survival in this moment was a gift that transcended allegiance, beyond politics, beyond war itself. It was a testament to the rarest quality in human conflict: honor. The coastline emerged, faint and distant. England, the promised land, lay just beyond the horizon. Franz knew he could not cross with them. If he followed, British defenses or Allied fighters would find him. His mission, his allegiance, the war itself, all demanded he turn back. Yet he lingered a moment longer, matching their flight, shielding them, ensuring that the dying B-17 could touch the channel. Charlie's hands trembled. The crew inside the bomber whispered prayers, some muttering thanks, others holding silent hope. They were alive because one man had chosen conscience over orders, mercy over duty, humanity over ideology. And the most improbable thing of all, the enemy, the soldier they had been trained to hate, had become their protector. Franz Müller tilted his wings one last time, gesturing goodbye, and lifted slightly to peel away from the formation. He raised his gloved hand, a crisp, deliberate salute. The gesture was clear, unwavering, a farewell, an acknowledgement, a pledge of respect. Charlie, stunned, raised his own hand in return. Time seemed to pause, the frozen wind carrying the silent acknowledgement across the sky. And then Franz banked away, disappearing into the gray mist, leaving the wounded bomber to crawl the final miles home, a fragile miracle trailing in his wake. For Charlie, that moment would never fade. The sight of the German pilot's calm, sorrowful face, the precision of his flight, and the honor of his choice would haunt him for the rest of his life. That single act of humanity had survived the fire and the fury of war, proving that the sky stretched endlessly, a vast frozen gray that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. The B-17 limped westward, each gust of wind threatening to tear it apart, yet somehow it persisted, guided by the desperate hands of its battered crew. Alongside them, Franz Müller held his position, his Messerschmitt gliding like a silent sentinel. The air was bitter, cutting through layers of clothing, biting its skin and muscle, but Franz barely felt it. His mind was locked on one purpose: keep these men alive. Below them, the French countryside was a blur of frost-covered trees and shattered villages, smoke rising faintly from the ruins of towns already claimed by war. German anti-aircraft batteries lay in wait, their guns ready to strike at anything that moved in the sky above. But Franz maneuvered with precision, guiding the bomber away from the deadliest flak zones, signaling subtly to the Americans which way to steer. The gunners on the ground hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks. Why would one of their own protect an enemy plane?
Orders screamed that the bomber must fall. Yet here was a German fighter flying as if it belonged to no nation but honor itself. Inside the bomber, the crew whispered prayers and gasped in disbelief. Charlie Brown's eyes were locked on the Messerschmitt. He could see the faint frost clinging to the canopy, the taut muscles in the pilot's arms, the calm, focused expression that somehow radiated both strength and sorrow. Every detail was etched in his memory. The way Franz's hand adjusted the throttle, the slight tilt of the wings when turbulence rocked the B-17, the way he seemed to anticipate every danger before it struck. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched into an eternity, and yet the world continued to turn beneath them. Every shake of the bomber, every groan of stressed metal reminded Charlie that they were one miscalculation away from death. Yet alongside them, Franz moved with a grace that defied both logic and the chaos of war. Charlie thought of his friends lost over Germany, of the pilots who had not made it home, of the letters from mothers and wives pleading for their sons and husbands. And he realized something profound. This German pilot was not merely sparing them out of indecision, he was choosing, deliberately, to honor life itself. In the midst of destruction, in the eye of hatred, Franz Müller had chosen mercy. The bomber shuddered violently as another flak burst exploded nearby, sending shrapnel slicing past the fuselage. The Messerschmitt shifted slightly, his movements precise, shielding them as though absorbing the danger himself. Charlie could feel the vibrations through the thin metal, a pulse of life and protection that synchronized with his own. The crew clung to their instruments, to anything solid, to the knowledge that they were no longer alone in the sky. Communication was impossible. Radios were dead, the fragile systems damaged beyond repair. And yet, somehow, understanding passed between them. Franz gestured, subtle movements of his wings and slight changes in altitude, guiding them toward the open expanse of the channel. Charlie waved his hand, a feeble, almost desperate attempt to acknowledge the gesture, to show recognition, gratitude, and hope all at once. Franz responded with the tilt of his wings, the brief, almost imperceptible nod of understanding. It was a silent conversation, transcending language, allegiance, and the madness that had enveloped the world below. The English coast emerged faintly in the distance, a promise of home and safety, yet still treacherous. Anti-aircraft fire remained a threat, and the bomber's engines were failing, each cough and sputter a reminder of how close death lingered. Franz knew he could not cross into England. He could not risk the radar, the fighters, the inevitable suspicion of Allied forces. But he lingered a moment longer, maintaining formation, ensuring that the B-17 would survive the final miles. Charlie's eyes were glued to the Messerschmitt. His crew, battered and bloody, whispered thanks and prayers under their breath. They were alive because of this young German pilot's choice. Alive because, for one fleeting moment in a sky full of war, one man had rejected killing, had rejected orders, had embraced the most human of all instincts, compassion. Franz's eyes flicked to the bomber one last time. He saw the fear, the exhaustion, the fragile hope in their expressions. And then he lifted his gloved hand to his helmet, raising it in a slow, deliberate salute. It was a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of farewell. Charlie hesitated for a heartbeat, then raised his own hand in return. Time seemed to pause. The frozen wind, the roaring engines, the distant flak, all fell away. There was only that singular moment of recognition between two men who had once been enemies, but were now bound by the unbreakable thread of shared humanity. Franz banked gently, pulling his plane away, fading into the gray mist of the sky. The bomber continued its limping journey toward the channel, carrying a miraculous cargo, life, hope, and the memory of an impossible act of honor. As the coastline drew closer, Charlie felt a strange clarity. He understood the lesson that Franz had imparted without words. Even in war, Even amid hatred and death, humanity could survive. The choices of one man could ripple through time, leaving an indelible mark far beyond medals, reports, or propaganda.
The B-17 shuddered again as its engines labored. Charlie's hands tightened on the yoke. The bomber was still fragile, still vulnerable, but the presence of Franz Müller beside them had given them a gift greater than survival. The knowledge that courage was not always measured by combat, but by the moral strength to choose mercy over violence. The English coast became clearer. The channel stretched ahead like a silver-gray river of promise. Franz Müller's Messerschmitt had departed, yet his impact lingered, etched into memory, seared into the hearts of men who would carry this story for decades. Charlie whispered to himself, voice barely audible over the drone of the engines. Thank you for sparing us." And though he knew Franz could never hear him, he hoped that, somehow, the pilot knew the difference he had made, the lives he had preserved, and the lesson he had imparted, that even in the deadliest of wars, honor and mercy could fly. The B-17 moved forward, battered but alive, toward the Channel, toward England, toward survival. And somewhere high above, in the frozen sky of Europe, a young German pilot vanished into the clouds, leaving behind the echo of a single human choice that would never be forgotten. The Channel stretched below the battered B-17 like a silver-gray ribbon, its waters churning with the chill of early winter. Each ripple, each cresting wave mirrored the trembling hearts of the men inside. The bomber was a broken giant, wings scarred by flak, engines wheezing with every push of the throttle. Yet, against all odds, it continued to fly. The surviving crew clung to life and to one another, their eyes haunted by the memory of what they had endured. Charlie Brown had scarcely spoken since the German pilot's salute. Words felt inadequate, trivial against the enormity of what had happened. He stared out through the frost-streaked glass, searching the gray horizon for the Messerschmitt, hoping for a glimpse of the man who had, against every expectation, chosen mercy over duty. But the fighter had vanished into the clouds, leaving nothing but silence and a sense of awe. "Land in England," Charlie said, his voice low, hoarse, almost reverent. "Just get us home." The journey across the Channel was agonizing. The B-17 shuddered with every gust of wind, metal groaning under the strain. The crew whispered prayers, half in faith, half in desperation. Every heartbeat was a stolen moment. Every second brought them closer to the thin promise of safety. And yet, Charlie's mind kept returning to the German pilot, the calm face, the precise movements, the deliberate choice to protect rather than destroy. He could not fathom it. No one could. It was impossible, yet it had happened. When the coast of England finally appeared, pale and fragile in the mist, a collective sigh of relief rose from the crew. But relief was tempered by exhaustion. The landing was perilous. The landing gear had taken too much punishment in the skies over France, and every roll across the tarmac was a test of the B-17's shattered frame. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and the plane skidded across the airfield before coming to a trembling halt. Medics and ground crews rushed forward, pulling the half-dead from the fuselage. Charlie was lifted from the cockpit, his body trembling, his mind still frozen on what had happened above the clouds. He could barely speak, but the words escaped anyway, a mantra repeated over and over. "The German, he didn't shoot, he saved us, he saved us." The story spread quickly among the airfield personnel. Officers were skeptical. "A German pilot? Sparing your lives?" they scoffed. "Impossible. That's propaganda. That's the stress talking." But Charlie could not deny what he had witnessed. He had seen mercy in a war that thrived on cruelty. He had felt it. It had saved them all. Meanwhile, Franz Müller returned to his base in Amiens. The winter sky had swallowed him, and he landed silently, the roar of his Messerschmitt muted against the stillness of the airfield. No one cheered, no one questioned his movements. But Franz carried a weight heavier than any mission, an awareness of what he had done and what it meant. He knew that command would never approve. Mercy was treason. Yet, in that frozen sky, amidst smoke and death, he had chosen humanity.
Months passed. The war raged on, consuming Europe with fire and steel. Franz continued to fly, defending the Reich with skill and precision, yet his heart was no longer in the violence. Every sortie was haunted by the faces of the men he had spared, by the memory of that fragile, impossible connection forged above the frozen clouds of France. By 1945, the Reich was collapsing. Franz was defending Berlin against overwhelming odds, his Messerschmitt still sharp, still deadly, still carrying the echo of a man who had once flown for mercy. And then, in April, fate caught up. Soviet fighters intercepted him over the burning city. Flames engulfed the plane. His body was lost in the chaos, and the skies claimed him forever. The war ended. Cities lay in ruins. Nations breathed uneasy relief, and survivors tried to rebuild shattered lives. Charlie Brown returned home to America, to the quiet streets of his hometown, to the embrace of family he had once feared would never see him again. Yet he could not escape the memory of that day, of that impossible act of mercy. He told the story to anyone who would listen, but few believed it. "A German pilot sparing your life?" They laughed. "You must be dreaming." Yet Charlie knew the truth, knew it in his bones and in his heart. That salute had changed everything, had preserved life in a world determined to destroy it. Years later, the story resurfaced. Charlie, now older, placed an ad in a veterans newsletter describing the flight, the wounded bomber, and the German pilot who had flown alongside them. Weeks passed until one day a letter arrived, postmarked from Canada. It was from Franz Müller, or Franz Stigler as he now went by, a man who had survived, who had lived to carry the memory of honor and mercy across decades. They met, two old men, white-haired, trembling, yet unmistakably the same men who had shared the frozen skies of 1943. Franz spoke softly, eyes misted with memory. "You were like a bird with broken wings. I could not shoot." Charlie's hands shook. "You saved us," he whispered. "You gave us life." And in that reunion, the war's horrors fell away, replaced by something enduring, something human, respect, honor, and the understanding that even in the deadliest conflicts, compassion could survive. They traveled together in the years that followed, telling the story of the German pilot who chose humanity over orders, of the men who had been spared, of the lessons that war could never erase. Their friendship became a living testament to the fact that even amid fire and death, a single act of mercy could ripple across time, leaving an indelible mark. In 2008, both men passed away within months of each other. Charlie first, Franz shortly after. Their ashes were scattered to the wind, high above the seas and lands where their destinies had first intersected. And somewhere, perhaps, beyond time and clouds, two planes fly side by side once more, a Messerschmitt and a B-17, bound not by war, but by honor and the fragile, enduring power of humanity. The story of the German pilot who saluted his enemy before dying is not a tale of nations or politics. It is a story of men, of choices, of the courage to honor life amidst death. And in that single, fleeting salute, humanity prevailed.